it's very interesting to look back in very, very ancient times, because this is a changing planet, and there's been a lot of dramatic changes over the millions of years. One of them, we'll go back 318 million years ago, and it's typical for the continents on the planet to move and shift quite dramatically a long distance. And so 318 million years ago, this North American continent had started about 1,000. It was down about 1,000, well, several thousand miles below where we are now. And 318 million years ago, if you look at the equator back then and the location of the plates, the equator was running straight through the arbor on this land. So a really great shift we have gone through. So over the 318 million years ago, this North American continent has come several thousand miles toward the North Pole. And so that was over years, but it takes time to make a dramatic shift like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we bring it to a later time that affects this particular area, at some point, I don't remember the exact time this was, but the earth split apart and created the Rio Grande Rift, where the earth split apart and it created a valley and the Rio Grande River. And the split was maybe 40 to 50 miles wide. And at that time, when an earth, when you have a rift like that, where the earth splits apart, the earth drops down and becomes thinner. And when this split apart, the earth dropped about 1,000 feet in this valley. So that happened, I don't know how many thousands or million years ago that was. And as we look at the land now, the larger, little bit taller hills just behind the Plaza Blanca or White Place, well, we are right on the edge, the western edge of the Rio Grande Rift, and the higher areas on the other side of the Plaza Blanca, that's the beginning of the Colorado Plateau that covers several states to the west. So then about 25,000 years ago, there were three volcanoes about a little over 100 miles north of here, north of Cuesta. And so 25,000 years ago, at least one of them erupted. And over the thousands of years, the volcanic ash and pumice that came out of those volcanoes was washed down gradually over thousands of years and came down to this valley and filled part of the valley. So the Plaza Blanca Formation that we see now is only a portion of what came down. The thickness was 1,000 feet thick. So when you walk on the Plaza Blanca, there's about 700 or 800 feet below your feet of that volcanic ash and pumice. So that's a dramatic change in this territory. And that's why we have such a beautiful scene of the Plaza Blanca. 15,000 years ago, just where the road up here ends in a little circle, at the very end of the road there, just beyond it, is another ancient volcano that erupted 15,000 years ago. A small volcano, but you can still walk around and see and touch the ridge around this volcano. So this is a interesting place to see what happened as things change on the planet.
You pointed that out last time we were here, and it's a real orangey rust colored, right? The
rust
parts you see of
colored,
it.
yes, it's a little different volcano than usual. It was orange rust, and the reason it was that color of the material that came up is because the area was covered with water, and when that happens and you have a volcano eruption underneath the water, when the lava meets the water, there's a great explosion, and the result of that is this orange colored silt. Around this territory, or around the Wild West here, you'll find so many varieties of stones and colored stones and crystals and things like that. These stones were created at different times during the periods of erosion or heat or volcanic activity, and also the oceans. For 5 years, this area has been covered with water from oceans.
Five times.
This has been covered. So that would bring up some sand and silt, and then the water, the rains and things like that would create a lot of erosion, which would expose some other layers. It's just a multi-layered formation. A lot of the North American continent was occupied hundreds or thousands of years ago by what we would call Native American societies and tribes. And this area in particular, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado, the Four Corners area, was a very popular place for Native Americans to live. And we find that examples of that on this particular land and on the mesas around this territory. Back behind the big house, I found an area, a small area, where there was a lot of obsidian flakes. Obsidian is a clear glass stone that came from a mountain about 10 miles south of here. And these were flakes that resulted from the Native Americans making tools and arrowheads and things out of obsidian. And so right behind the house there was one of their workshops. That was a unique find. I also found a larger stone, maybe this long and that big around, that was shaped in such a way that you could put a wooden handle on it and use it as a hoe. So that was their gardening tool. And I have an example of that. I should have brought it. But anyway, and also what we find on the land, on most of the mesas in this territory, and perhaps others, are Native American gardens. And what they would do, they would find an area on top of a mesa where there was a gentle slope of the land before it just dropped off, and they would define lay out a particular garden and surround it with stones to define a garden space. This is where they grew their corn and beans and squash and other things. And a unique thing they did that worked very well, when they planted a seed, they would put a little pebble over the seed, and that would hold the moisture in and allow the seed to sprout. And that was a very successful way of assisting the sprouting. So on this land, and in fact on the land that belongs to House of Mica now, about 100 feet west of the arbor is one of the Native American gardens. And on the land I've found not only the obsidian flakes, but some flakes of chert or flint, and that comes from another mountain over here about 10 miles away. And then I found an arrowhead on the land over here that they own now. I guess the land taught us is that the earth is a beautiful place to live, and we humans need to take care of it, because we've reached the point in our manufacturing and things like that where we might be able to abuse the land, abuse the earth so much that we could destroy the earth. So, and also our studying of how people have looked at global warming and things like that. And so in our main focus in our life is to take care of this planet Earth, our home. One of the things they learn is how absolutely beautiful the planet can be. And so that inspires people who come here to take care of the land wherever they are, to preserve its beauty as well. And also those who have the ability to communicate in some manner with the land or the entities overshadowing the land, then they'll learn quite a bit from those intelligent beings. So it's a place for people to learn about the earth, living on the earth, taking care of the earth, taking care of everything connected to the earth, and taking care of each other, so that they would do what they do is for the good of the whole, not just the individual.